Emma Hale was only 8 years old, but the silence she carried felt older than the walls of the Hale mansion. That afternoon, the house looked peaceful from the outside, sunlight on marble floors, a quiet breeze through the garden. But hidden behind the heavy laundry room door was a sound no child should ever make. A muffled whimper, then a shaky breath, then a tiny voice trying not to cry. Inside, Emma stood on her tiptoes beside a deep sink, struggling to lift a pile of wet clothes far too heavy for her small arms. Steam curled up from the water, thick enough to fog the glass window. She didn't dare pull her hands away, even though the heat made her flinch. Victoria, her stepmother, watched from the doorway with crossed arms, tapping her heel impatiently. "Keep going, you're too soft. This will teach you responsibility," Victoria said, her voice smooth but cold. Emma didn't answer. She bit her lip and nodded, hoping if she stayed quiet, Victoria would be less angry today. She dipped her hands back into the steaming water, and her breath hitched. The pain made her eyes blur. She blinked fast. She couldn't cry. Crying made things worse. What Emma didn't know was that someone else had entered the house. Alexander Hale, her father, a millionaire known for his sharp decisions, flawless business sense, and a schedule too full for mistakes. He had returned early from a meeting, thinking he would surprise his family. Instead, something else surprised him. He paused in the hallway when he heard the faint sound, so small, so broken, that it chilled him deeper than any business loss ever could. It was the sound of his daughter trying not to cry. Alexander opened the laundry room door, and what he saw on the other side would shatter everything he thought he knew. Emma Hale had the kind of gentleness that made people want to protect her, except the one person who should have cared for her the most when her father wasn't around. At 8 years old, she already understood things no child should: when to stay silent, when to move softly, when to disappear into the background so she wouldn't upset anyone, especially Victoria. Before her mother passed away, Emma was different. Bright, talkative, always humming little songs as she followed her dad around the house. But grief changed the Hale home. Alexander buried himself in business, drowning in meetings and late-night calls. And Emma, she learned to keep her sadness small so it wouldn't add weight to her father's shoulders. So when Victoria entered their lives, beautiful, polished, perfect on the outside, Emma tried her hardest to be good. She wanted her father to be happy again. She wanted the family to work. But Victoria's smile faded quickly after the wedding. When Alexander wasn't home, she became strict, demanding, impossible to please. She said Emma was too sensitive, too fragile, too emotional, and needed to toughen up. Little by little, Emma began shrinking inside herself. She stopped humming. She stopped speaking unless spoken to. She stopped asking her father for help because she worried he might think she was causing trouble. Victoria didn't scream or hit. She didn't need to. She used chores, small ones at first, picking up toys, folding her own clothes, sweeping the hallway. Normal things. Then they became heavier, carrying laundry baskets, scrubbing the bathtub, cleaning the patio steps. Emma tried her best because that's what she always did. But 2 weeks before the laundry room incident, Victoria quietly added another rule. All clothes must be washed by hand. Hot water cleans better. Emma didn't protest. She thought it was her job. She didn't realize she wasn't supposed to carry so much. Every day after school, she would slip into the laundry room. She would push open the heavy faucet and watch steam rise, her small hands hovering nervously before dipping them in. The heat stung, but she told herself she could handle it, because if she complained, Victoria told her she was being dramatic. And Emma believed her. What hurt most wasn't the hot water. It was the fear that her father might see her as a burden if she spoke up. That fear kept her silent, until the moment he walked through that laundry room door and saw the truth for himself. From the outside, the Hale residence looked like something pulled straight out of a luxury magazine. Towering windows, elegant stone columns, manicured hedges shaped to perfection. Neighbors often whispered that Emma was such a lucky girl to grow up in a millionaire's mansion. They imagined a life filled with warm breakfasts, laughter echoing through high ceilings, and a father who tucked her in every night. But inside those same walls, silence sat heavier than marble. Most days, the house felt too big for one little girl. The dining room table fit 12 people. Yet Emma usually ate alone with Victoria, watching over her like a judge. The grand staircase that guests admired so much had become the path Emma learned to climb quietly, counting each step so she wouldn't disturb anyone. Her bedroom was beautiful, full of pastel colors and toys she never played with anymore. She didn't touch anything that might be too messy or too childish. Victoria made sure of that. When Alexander was home, he'd smile at his daughter, rub her hair gently, and ask how school was. Emma always answered with one word: good. She never mentioned the extra chores, the uncomfortable rules, or the way Victoria's eyes hardened when he wasn't looking. She didn't want to seem ungrateful, and she didn't want to lose what little time she had with her father. Victoria, on the other hand, played her role flawlessly. When Alexander was around, she laughed, dressed beautifully, and pretended to adore Emma, calling her sweetheart, touching her shoulder lightly, acting like the caring mother figure she promised to be. Guests praised Victoria's grace. They believed she was the perfect addition to the Hale family. But the mansion had corners that captured whispers. It had rooms that remembered tears. And the laundry room, the smallest, simplest space in the house, held the truth no one had dared to speak. That room wasn't just where clothes were washed. It became the place Emma hid her quiet misery, where she scrubbed until her arms ached, where she whispered to herself that she had to be strong. The steam that rose from the hot water wasn't just heat. It was the only witness to her pain. And it was this room, of all places, where everything would finally unravel. Because the moment Alexander stepped inside, the perfect image of his home began to crack. Victoria Hale entered Alexander's life like a breath of fresh air, or at least that's how everyone described her. She was stunning, polished, and impossibly charming. Her laughter was soft, her manners flawless, and she carried herself like someone born to belong in luxury. At galas and charity dinners, people whispered about how lucky Alexander was to have found love again after such a painful loss. They assumed Victoria would bring warmth back into the Hale home. But Emma was the first to notice the crack in Victoria's perfect mask. It started small, a sharp glance when Alexander wasn't watching, a sigh of annoyance when Emma asked an innocent question, a too tight grip on the girl's shoulder when guiding her through the hallway. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, just enough for Emma to understand she needed to stay out of Victoria's way. Victoria had a talent for adjusting her face instantly. The moment she heard Alexander's footsteps, her eyes softened, her voice lifted, and her arms opened in a warm gesture. She'd call out, "Emma, sweetheart, come help me with the table," pretending to include her. Emma always obeyed because she didn't want to upset her father. But she knew the rule: smile when he's looking, disappear when he's not. Behind closed doors, Victoria was different. She treated Emma like an inconvenience, too quiet, too sensitive, too attached to her father. She believed Emma competed for attention, and she planned to fix that. Her method wasn't yelling, it was control. She assigned chores with a calm expression, as if they were normal for any child. When Emma looked overwhelmed, Victoria would say, "Don't be dramatic. Your father expects you to learn responsibility." The day Victoria discovered the laundry room was the one place Emma couldn't avoid heavy work. She claimed it immediately. This will make her stronger, she told herself. But deep down, she simply liked having power over someone so small. Emma felt it. She felt the distance, the pressure, the unspoken threat. Obey or make things worse. What Victoria didn't realize was that her influence had limits. She believed Alexander trusted her blindly. She believed Emma was too scared to speak. She believed the house was hers to control. But all masks slip eventually. And when Alexander walked into that laundry room, Victoria's perfect facade finally began to crumble. When Alexander opened the laundry room door, the first thing he saw wasn't the steam. It wasn't the pile of clothes or even the deep sink filled with scalding water. It was Emma. His little girl stood frozen, her small shoulders shaking as she tried to hold back tears. Her hands hovered above the steaming sink, red and trembling. For a second, she didn't even notice her father. She was too focused on staying brave, on surviving the moment. Victoria reacted first. She spun around, her expression flickering from irritation to surprise to a perfectly composed smile in under a second. "Alex, you're home early," she said brightly, stepping away from Emma as if she'd been offering gentle guidance instead of orders. Alexander didn't respond. His eyes were locked on Emma's hands. He walked toward her slowly, kneeling so he could look her in the eye. "Sweetheart, what are you doing?" Emma swallowed hard. "Laundry," she whispered, her voice thin. "Stepmom said I have to finish it before dinner." Alexander glanced at the sink again. Steam rolled upward like smoke. He reached out his hand carefully, but Emma flinched. Not from him, but from the thought of getting in trouble for stopping. That flinch shattered him. His gaze snapped to Victoria. "Why's the water this hot?" Victoria let out a soft laugh, as though the question was silly. Hot water cleans better, and Emma needs routine. Structure is healthy for her, you know that. But her tone carried something else, something defensive. Alexander stood up slowly. "She's 8. Victoria shrugged. "She's capable. You baby her too much." That did it. The sentence, spoken so casually, pushed everything off balance. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too heavy. Alexander felt heat rising in his chest, not from anger, but from the realization that he had overlooked something dangerous. He walked back to the sink, dipping 2 fingers into the water. The burning sting made him jerk his hand out instantly. "That's not hot," he said, voice low. "That's boiling." Victoria stiffened. "You're exaggerating. She needs discipline." Emma's eyes widened at the word. Alexander saw the fear flash across her face, fear he'd never seen before. And in that instant, he understood one thing with absolute clarity. Something was terribly, painfully wrong inside his home. And this was only the beginning of what he was about to uncover. Alexander's voice softened as he turned back to Emma, but his heart was pounding. He knelt again, trying to steady his breath before speaking. "Sweetheart, look at me," he whispered. Emma lifted her eyes slowly. They were watery but determined, as if she was still fighting to be strong, because being strong was the only thing she thought kept the peace in the house. "It's okay," Alexander said gently. "You can tell me the truth. Why were you washing clothes in water that hot?" Emma hesitated. She glanced quickly at Victoria, who stood with perfect posture, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The message was clear. Don't say anything. Emma's shoulders tensed. She tucked her hands behind her back as if hiding the truth would somehow protect her father from more trouble. But Alexander waited. For the first time in a long time, he was fully there, present, watching, refusing to look away. I didn't want to mess up," Emma finally whispered. "Stepmom said I had to do it right." Victoria let out a light breath. "See? She understands." But Emma shook her head faintly, a movement so small it was almost invisible. Alexander caught it. His voice softened further. "Emma, has this happened before?" The room fell into a fragile stillness. Emma's lip quivered. She looked down at her hands, red, tender, pressed together nervously. "Yes," she said after a long pause. "She told me to use hot water every time. I didn't want her to be mad. I didn't want you to think I was difficult." That last word hit Alexander like a punch. "Difficult?" he repeated, stunned. "Who told you that?" Emma looked at Victoria. Victoria shifted. "Oh, come on, Alex, she's exaggerating. Kids twist things when they're emotional. She's sensitive." Sensitive. That word again. The one Emma had absorbed like it was a flaw she needed to hide. Alexander turned back to Emma. "Has she asked you to do other chores like this?" Emma nodded slowly. "Only when you're not home." That was the moment the truth snapped into place. The tension in Alexander's chest rose, not uncontrollable rage, but a deep protective fire, one that came from realizing his daughter had been suffering quietly while he was away building a future he thought was protecting her. He stood up slowly, eyes colder than Victoria had ever seen. And for the first time, Victoria realized she no longer controlled the narrative. For a long moment, the laundry room felt like 2 different worlds colliding, one where Victoria's polished smile ruled the household, and another where Emma's quiet truth finally surfaced. Alexander stood between them, breathing carefully, trying to understand how all of this had happened right under his roof. Victoria broke the silence first. "Alex," she said, stepping forward with a calm, almost soothing tone, "you're misunderstanding everything. I've been trying to teach Emma structure. She cries easily. She misinterprets things. You know how sensitive she is." This time, Alexander didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on Emma, whose small body instinctively stiffened at every word. Emma wasn't lying. He could see it, feel it. Her fear wasn't the kind that appeared in a single moment. It was the kind that grew over time, quietly, carefully. Structure? Alexander repeated quietly. By having her put her hands in water that could burn an adult? Victoria's smile faltered, just slightly. You're exaggerating. It's warm water, Alex. You just reacted dramatically because you walked in at the wrong moment. Kids need responsibility. You've been away so much. You don't see what she gets away with. That hit a nerve. Emma flinched. Alexander watched it happen. Gets away with? He echoed. Emma? She doesn't even raise her voice. Victoria straightened her shoulders, switching strategies. You weren't here. I handled everything alone. Maybe I pushed her because I needed help. But she's not a baby, Alex. She needs discipline. The word discipline made Emma's fingers curl tightly together. Alexander finally turned toward Victoria, and when he did, the air shifted. His eyes, normally patient and thoughtful, carried a kind of protective calm that was far more intimidating than anger. You don't discipline a child through fear, he said quietly, and you certainly don't assign her tasks meant for adults. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. She wasn't used to losing control of a conversation, or of a person. Alex, she tried again, voice sharp now, you can't take her side just because she cried. Emma's breath hitched. Alexander inhaled slowly, steadying himself so he wouldn't raise his voice. I'm not taking sides. I'm believing my daughter, and I should have done that sooner. For the first time, Victoria's confidence cracked. She could feel it slipping, the power she thought she had, the perfect image she relied on. Because Alexander wasn't doubting Emma anymore. He was doubting her. Alexander had always been a man of restraint. In business, he negotiated calmly. In conflict, he spoke with logic. He was known for keeping his emotions in check, no matter the pressure. But nothing, no boardroom, no crisis, no million-dollar loss, had ever stirred something inside him the way this moment did. He looked at Emma's trembling hands again, the redness, the tiny flinches she tried so hard to hide, the way she kept glancing at Victoria, as if waiting for permission to breathe. A slow, heavy realization settled in his chest. His daughter wasn't just scared. She was conditioned to be scared. He straightened, and when he spoke, his voice carried something Victoria had never heard from him before. Controlled, steady, but sharp enough to cut through every lie in the room. Emma, he asked quietly, did she ever tell you not to say anything to me? Emma hesitated, shifting from one foot to the other. She said you were busy, that I shouldn't bother you unless it was important. Alexander swallowed hard. And is this not important? Emma's eyes flickered, almost in disbelief, like she had never been asked that question before. Victoria forced a laugh. Oh, Alex, please. She's twisting things. Kids dramatize. You're letting her manipulate you because she cried. She's 8. She knows how to get attention. That was it. That sentence snapped something inside him. Not loudly, but decisively. A breaking point made not of rage, but of clarity. He took a step forward. Not aggressive, simply firm. Don't talk about her like that. Not in front of me. Not ever again. Victoria blinked, stunned. She had never seen him push back so quickly. But Alexander wasn't done. He moved to the sink and turned the faucet slightly, letting the water run across his fingers just long enough to feel its intensity again. He didn't flinch this time. He let the heat burn for a half a second, long enough for the truth to be undeniable. He dried his hand and faced her. This isn't discipline, he said. It's cruelty. Victoria opened her mouth to argue, but the look in his eyes silenced her. Not anger, something deeper. A protective fire that had been ignored for too long. The room felt smaller, quieter, heavier. Emma looked up at her father, searching his face. And for the first time in months, she saw something she thought she had lost. A father who finally saw everything. Alexander reached gently for Emma's hands, but he paused, giving her time to pull away if she felt scared. When she didn't, he lifted her small palms carefully. The sight made his stomach tighten. Her skin was pink and sensitive, the kind that came from repeated exposure, not one moment but many. Sweetheart, he whispered, his voice breaking despite every effort to hold steady. How long have your hands been like this? Emma looked down, ashamed, as if the injuries were somehow her fault. A while, she murmured. They get better. Then they hurt again. I just try to be careful. Alexander blinked slowly, trying to process those words. Why didn't you tell me? Emma shrugged one small shoulder. You're always busy, and I didn't want to make you worried. Stepmom said strong girls don't complain. That last sentence made his pulse spike. Victoria stepped forward, forcing a smile. Alex, please. Children get scrapes and little irritations all the time. This is nothing serious. She's trying to get out of chores. She didn't ask to get out of anything, Alexander cut in sharply. She didn't even ask for help. Emma's lip trembled. She wasn't used to her father standing up for her like this. For the first time, she looked between him and Victoria and realized she wasn't invisible. Let me see all of it, Alexander said softly. Not just your hands. Emma hesitated, then rolled up her sleeves. Along her forearms were faint, healed-over marks. Dry patches, mild irritation, signs of repeated strain. Nothing severe, but enough to show she had been working far harder than any 8-year-old ever should. Alexander inhaled sharply. You've been hurting for a long time. Emma's eyes filled. I tried to do it right. I tried to be good. His heart shattered. Victoria scoffed, arms crossed defensively. Alex, this is ridiculous. She's overly dramatic. You're letting her story. This isn't a story, he snapped, turning toward her. It's evidence. Victoria's face paled. Alexander lifted Emma into his arms, something he hadn't done in months because she was getting older. Emma sank against him immediately, relieved, clinging to his shirt like she had been waiting for this moment. He held her tightly, protectively, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. It was then that he realized the truth. His little girl had been suffering steps away from him, and he had never seen it. Until now. Alexander didn't waste a single minute. With Emma wrapped gently in his arms, he carried her out of the laundry room, away from the steam, away from Victoria's excuses. He didn't raise his voice or argue further. His silence alone said everything. Victoria followed behind, trying to keep up. Alex, you're blowing this out of proportion, she insisted. A doctor's visit? Really? But he didn't even look at her. He buckled Emma carefully into the back seat of the car, smoothing her hair and whispering, You're safe, I promise. Then he closed the door softly, walked around to the driver's side, and pulled away without another word. At the urgent care clinic, Emma sat nervously on the exam table, swinging her legs lightly. She looked small in the oversized gown. Alexander stayed beside her, holding her hand, letting her squeeze his thumb whenever she felt scared. Dr. Patel entered, a warm-faced pediatrician with kind eyes. She examined Emma's hands gently, asking questions in a soft voice so Emma wouldn't feel pressured. These marks look like repeated irritation, Dr. Patel explained, turning to Alexander. Not severe burns, thankfully, but they do suggest she's been exposed to heat or friction over time. Alexander nodded slowly, swallowing hard. Emma glanced up at him nervously. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart, he said immediately. Not at all. His voice cracked on the last word. Dr. Patel continued carefully. She has some dryness and light inflammation on her arms as well. Nothing dangerous right now, but this shouldn't be happening. A child her age shouldn't be doing tasks that strain her skin or muscles like this. Victoria stiffened in the corner of the room, arms crossed. So you're saying she's fine? I'm saying she needs rest, Dr. Patel corrected gently, and she needs to avoid any activity that exposes her to high heat or harsh labor. Alexander's jaw tightened. She will. Dr. Patel hesitated, then asked the question that made the room go silent. Emma, has anyone asked you to do something that hurts your hands? Emma looked at her father first, searching his face, checking if she was allowed to answer. When he nodded, she whispered, yes. Victoria's eyes widened, but she didn't speak. Who asked you? Dr. Patel asked softly. Emma pointed. Not with hesitation, not with fear. With truth. Straight at Victoria. And Alexander felt something deep inside him shift. Something protective, final, unshakable. Because now the truth wasn't just seen, it was confirmed. The car ride home from the clinic was silent. Too silent. Emma sat in the back seat, wrapped in a soft blanket the nurse had given her. She kept her eyes on her hands, gently rubbing her thumbs together, unsure whether she was allowed to feel relieved. Alexander drove with both hands gripping the wheel, jaw tight, replaying every detail in his mind. Victoria sat beside him, fuming quietly, her polished mask cracking along the edges. The second they stepped inside the house, Victoria launched into her defense. "Alex, you can't seriously believe all of this," she said sharply. "She's a child. Children exaggerate, they're emotional. She probably misunderstood what I asked." Alexander didn't respond. He was tired of excuses. He was tired of missing signs he should have seen long ago. Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice like she was offering wisdom. "You know how much I've done for this family. I stepped in when you were drowning after your wife passed. I held this house together, and now you're going to let an 8-year-old smear my name because she got a little warm water on her hands?" Emma flinched at the phrase, "a little warm water." Alexander caught it. Every small reaction, every fear. He turned slowly to Victoria. "She pointed at you," he said quietly, directly. Victoria's eyes flashed. "Kids point at whoever they think will get the most attention. She's manipulating you." Emma stepped back, shrinking behind her father's arm. Alexander noticed. And that's when something inside him snapped, not with anger, but with clarity. "She's afraid of you," he said. Victoria scoffed loudly. "She's dramatic, Alex. You spoil her. Someone has to teach her discipline. If you kept parenting instead of traveling, maybe she wouldn't be this weak." Emma's breath hitched. Alexander shielded her instantly. "You don't get to speak about her like that," he said, voice low. "Not anymore." Victoria's tone turned icy. "So that's it? You're choosing her over me?" Alexander looked at Emma, her small frame, her shaking hands, her eyes searching his for safety. "There is no choice," he said. "She's my daughter." For the first time, Victoria lost her composure. Her voice rose with desperation. "Alex, think. If people find out about this, they'll blame me. They'll drag my name through the mud. You can't let that happen. You owe me." "I owe you nothing," he cut in. The power dynamic shifted like a door slamming shut. And Victoria finally realized she was losing control, completely, irreversibly, and in front of the one person who mattered most. For years, Alexander Hale had been known as a man who weighed every decision carefully. He calculated risks, studied outcomes, and never acted impulsively. But as he stood in the foyer of his own home, with Emma trembling behind him and Victoria unraveling in front of him, he didn't need time, data, or strategy. He needed to protect his daughter. "Victoria," he said, voice calm but unshakable, "you need to leave the house, tonight." Her eyes widened, disbelief twisting her features. "Leave? Alex, this is ridiculous. You're reacting emotionally. She's a child. She doesn't understand what she's saying." Alexander didn't blink. "She understands enough to be afraid." Victoria stepped forward, trying to reclaim ground. "You're throwing away our marriage because she got her feelings hurt? Because she can't handle a few chores?" Her voice sharpened, dripping with contempt. "You're making a mistake." Emma shrank behind him, clutching the back of his shirt with her good hand. She didn't speak, not because she didn't want to, but because she had spent months learning that silence kept her safe. "Not anymore." Alexander placed a steady hand on her shoulder, a silent reassurance. "I'm not making a mistake. I'm correcting one." Victoria stared at him, stunned. The perfect facade she maintained for so long was slipping fast. "I supported you," she said, voice trembling. "I stood beside you when you were grieving. I held this house together." "You controlled this house," he corrected, "and you hurt my daughter." Victoria's face contorted. "You can't prove anything." "I don't need to prove anything to you," he replied. "I saw enough. I heard enough. And Emma has no reason to lie." Silence filled the room, thick, heavy, final. Alexander took a deep breath. "Pack a bag. You'll stay at the Lakeview apartment until we figure out the rest." Victoria scoffed in disbelief. "You're actually serious." "I am." His tone left no room for negotiation. Victoria looked past him, straight at Emma. Her glare was sharp, cold enough to make the little girl step back again. Alexander instantly moved, blocking the line of sight. "That's the last time you look at her that way," he warned. Victoria froze. The message was clear. Her power in this home was gone. And for the first time, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Safe. The moment the front door slammed behind Victoria, the house fell into a silence Emma had never heard before. Not the fearful silence she'd grown used to. This one felt different, softer, like the walls themselves were finally allowed to breathe. Alexander locked the door, exhaled slowly, then turned to his daughter. Emma stood in the middle of the foyer, small and unsure, her fingers twisted into the fabric of her dress. Without Victoria in the room, the weight she'd been carrying suddenly felt too heavy to hold. "Emma," Alexander said gently, kneeling so he could look up at her instead of down. "You're okay now. She can't hurt you. You're safe." The word safe cracked something open. Emma shook her head, eyes filling with tears she had been swallowing down for months. "Daddy, I didn't want to tell you," she whispered. "I didn't want you to think I was trouble." Alexander's chest tightened painfully. "Sweetheart, why would I ever think that?" "Because she said," Emma hiccuped, the sentence breaking apart as her voice trembled. "She said you'd be tired of me if I complained, that you didn't have time for problems, that I had to be good or you'd get upset." Alexander felt his heart drop. He reached for her hand, but Emma stumbled forward before he could fully extend it, throwing herself into his arms with a desperate force he wasn't expecting. She sobbed into his chest, small body shaking. Not dramatic, not loud, just raw, pent-up heartbreak finally finding a place to land. Alexander wrapped both arms around her, holding her close, holding her like she was 8 again, like she should have been held all along. His voice cracked as he whispered into her hair, "You could never be trouble. Not ever, not for 1 second. You're my daughter, my little girl. I should have seen this sooner. I'm so sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry." Emma clung to him, gripping his shirt like she was afraid he'd disappear if she let go. "I tried to be strong," she cried softly. "I tried not to need anything." "You don't have to be strong alone," he murmured. "That's my job. I'm supposed to protect you. And I will. I promise you, I won't let anything like this happen again." Slowly, Emma's sobs quieted. She stayed in his arms, breathing shakily, finally letting herself rest. For the first time in a long time, she believed him. Because for the first time, he wasn't just hearing her. He was truly listening. That night, after Emma had finally fallen asleep, curled against him on the sofa because she didn't want to be alone, Alexander stayed awake. The house was dim and quiet, the soft glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the living room. He looked down at his daughter's peaceful face, her tear-streaked cheeks dried, her breath steady at last. She looked so fragile, so small, and the guilt inside him grew heavier with every passing minute. He stroked her hair gently, careful not to wake her. How did I miss this? The question echoed in his mind like a drumbeat. He replayed every moment of the past year, the long hours at the office, the business trips, the times he'd told Emma, "We'll talk later, sweetheart," thinking she had just wanted to chat about school or friends. He remembered the quiet dinners, the faint hesitation when she hugged him good night, the soft "I'm fine" whenever he asked how she was doing. He should have seen the signs. A father should notice when his child is shrinking inside themselves. But he hadn't, and that truth carved a hollow ache in his chest. Alexander rested his forehead against the back of the couch, eyes stinging. Losing his wife had shattered him, and he'd convinced himself that providing financially was enough. That as long as Emma lacked nothing materially, she would be okay. He thought giving her stability meant giving her the best life possible. He had been wrong. His grief had created a blind spot, and Victoria had stepped into that blind spot with a smile he wanted desperately to believe. She had taken advantage of his vulnerability, his absence, his trust, and Emma, his little girl, paid the price. A quiet voice rose in his memory. "I didn't want you to think I was trouble." He clenched his jaw, swallowing hard. How could Emma ever believe such a thing? How could she think she needed to hide her pain so he wouldn't be burdened? Because he hadn't been there. Not really. A tear slipped quietly down his cheek, the kind he hadn't shed since the day he lost his wife. He brushed it away quickly, looking back down at Emma. She shifted in her sleep, her hand reaching blindly until it touched his arm, as if checking he was still there. He covered her hand with his own. "I'm here," he whispered, voice breaking, "and I won't fail you again." In that moment, Alexander made a silent vow, a vow that would shape every decision from this night forward. He would protect her, rebuild her trust, and become the father she deserved, no matter the cost. Morning sunlight crept slowly into the living room, warming the space where Alexander and Emma had fallen asleep together. Emma stirred first, blinking up at her father with sleepy confusion, as if she wasn't entirely sure the safety she felt last night hadn't been a dream. When she realized he was still there, her muscles relaxed. "You stayed," she whispered. "Of course I stayed," Alexander replied, brushing a loose strand of hair from her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in months, Emma smiled, a tiny, timid smile, but real. Alexander felt something inside him lift. He needed that smile as much as she did. "Are we still okay?" she asked quietly, as though afraid his comfort would disappear if she acknowledged it. "We're better than okay," he told her, "and today we're going to do something special, something just for us." Emma sat up, curiosity flickering across her face. "Like what?" He tapped her nose gently. "Whatever you want." It started small. Pancakes in the kitchen. Messy, uneven, slightly burned on the edges because Emma insisted on flipping them herself. They laughed when batter splattered on the counter. Alexander didn't rush her, didn't correct her. He just let her be ate. After breakfast, they went to the park. Emma ran across the grass, her laughter echoing. Light, free, a sound he hadn't heard in far too long. Alexander followed behind, watching her climb the small play structure with the enthusiasm of a child finally allowed to breathe. They ate ice cream on a bench. Emma's dripped on her hand and she giggled while wiping it off. Alexander handed her napkins but secretly savored every bit of the moment. There was no fear in her eyes, no hesitance, just a little girl enjoying the day. As they walked home, Emma slipped her hand into his, a gesture she hadn't done since Victoria arrived. Alexander squeezed it gently. "Daddy?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart? Are you mad at me for not telling you sooner?" His heart ached. He knelt down so they were eye level. "No, never. The only thing I'm upset about is that you felt you had to go through it alone." Emma swallowed hard, blinking fast. He placed both hands on her shoulders. "From now on, you come to me with anything. Big or small, scary or silly. I will always listen. I will always believe you, and I will always protect you." Emma leaned forward and wrapped her arms around his neck, holding on tightly. "I love you, Daddy." He hugged her back just as tightly, maybe even a little tighter. "I love you more, Emma, and I'm here now, really here." For the first time, his promise wasn't just words. It was a vow written in every choice he would make from this day forward. Alexander hoped that removing Victoria from the house would be the end of it, that she would accept responsibility, stay away, and let him focus on healing Emma. But people like Victoria didn't disappear quietly, not when their pride was threatened, not when they felt power slipping through their fingers. 2 days after she left, she showed up again. It happened in the late afternoon. Emma was drawing at the kitchen table, soft colors, quiet lines, finally looking like a child again. Alexander was washing dishes, humming lightly, enjoying the rare peace filling the room. Then the doorbell rang. Emma stiffened immediately. Alexander noticed. When he opened the door, Victoria stood on the porch, flawless as ever, dressed in an elegant coat and heels far too polished for a simple visit. Her eyes were cold, no warmth left in them. "We need to talk," she said sharply. "No," Alexander replied, blocking the doorway. "We don't." Victoria scoffed. "You can't keep me out of my own home." "This isn't your home," he said calmly. "Not anymore." Her expression twisted. "So you're really doing this? Throwing me out because your daughter had a meltdown?" Behind Alexander, Emma peeked from the kitchen doorway before pulling herself back into hiding. She didn't want Victoria to see her, but she needed to know she was safe. Victoria continued, voice rising. "Do you realize how this will look? People will think you're unstable, that you kicked out your wife because a spoiled child cried to get her way." Alexander inhaled deeply, restraining his anger. "No one is believing your manipulation anymore." She stepped closer, lowering her voice into a threatening whisper. "You think you can just walk away from this without consequences? I can ruin you, Alex. I can talk to reporters. I can twist this whole thing. I can make you look like the one who—" "That's enough," he said firmly, his voice echoing with authority she had never heard from him. Victoria froze. "If you make one move to threaten my daughter or smear her name," he continued, "I will pursue every legal option to ensure you never come near her again." The confidence, the absolute certainty in his tone, Victoria wasn't expecting it. She took a step back, struggling to regain composure. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "No," Alexander said, closing the door slowly but decisively. "The only regret I have is trusting you." The latch clicked shut. Emma ran into his arms, shaking a little. "Is she gone?" "Yes, sweetheart," he whispered, lifting her up. "And she won't hurt you again." For the first time, Emma believed him completely. Because the door wasn't just closed, it was closed for good. Victoria never handled rejection well, especially when she believed she had built the perfect image of herself. A graceful wife, a refined socialite, a woman everyone admired. Losing control over Alexander and the household bruised her ego far more than she expected. And when pride mixes with anger, people like Victoria don't look inward. They attack outward. The next morning, Alexander woke to a string of missed calls from colleagues, friends, even his attorney. Something was wrong. His phone buzzed again. "Alex," his friend Mark said the moment he picked up, "have you seen the posts?" "What posts?" Alexander asked, dread forming in his stomach. Mark sighed heavily. "Victoria went public." Alexander opened his laptop. Within minutes, he found them. Victoria had posted a long, emotional statement online painting herself as a victim, claiming she was unfairly thrown out, that Emma was emotionally unstable, and that Alexander had become volatile. She hinted that Emma had behavioral problems and that Victoria tried to discipline her out of love. Emma walked into the room just then, holding her stuffed bunny. She saw her father's expression and paused. "Daddy, what's wrong?" He closed the laptop instantly. "Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart." But he was wrong, because the fire Victoria sparked was spreading fast. Within hours, gossip pages picked it up. A tabloid posted, "Millionaire Hale marriage collapse, stepmother claims child lashed out." Speculation comments filled the article. Some people sided with Victoria. Others doubted her story. But the noise was loud enough to drown out truth. Alexander's jaw clenched. This wasn't just about him anymore. Victoria was attacking Emma, the one person he had sworn to protect. He knew he had to respond, but carefully. Not with anger, not with emotion, with facts. So he contacted his attorney, gathered the reports from Dr. Patel, the notes from the school counselor who had noticed Emma's recent withdrawal, and even statements from the household staff who had quietly witnessed Victoria's cold behavior. That afternoon, his attorney called. "Alex, if we present all this, the truth will come out very clearly." Alexander looked at Emma, who was coloring quietly on the living room floor, her small shoulders finally relaxed after days of anxiety. "Do it," he said firmly. "I won't let anyone lie about my daughter." Victoria thought she could control the narrative, but she forgot one thing. Truth, once given a voice, echoes louder than any lie. The storm Victoria created raged loudly online, but inside the Hale home, something else entirely was happening. Something quieter, something warmer, something Emma had almost forgotten how to feel. Peace. In the days following Alexander's legal response, the house slowly transformed. It wasn't the walls or the furniture or the lighting that changed. It was the air. It felt lighter, softer, as if the mansion was finally allowed to be a home again instead of a stage where Emma tiptoed to avoid trouble. Emma began waking up without fear. She no longer hesitated before stepping out of her bedroom. She no longer paused to listen for Victoria's footsteps. She no longer hugged her stuffed bunny tightly in the hallway, waiting for permission to breathe. Instead, she wandered into the kitchen each morning to find her father already there, making breakfast, crooked pancakes, uneven scrambled eggs, toast sometimes burned at the edges. He wasn't perfect at it, but he was trying. And to Emma, it was perfect anyway. Some mornings, she giggled when he dropped eggshells into the bowl by accident. Some mornings, he lifted her onto the counter and let her stir the batter. All mornings, he kissed the top of her head and said, "Good morning, sweetheart," like he meant it with his whole heart. At night, he read her stories again. Voices, silly accents, dramatic pauses. Emma didn't realize how much she had missed the sound of laughter until it filled the room again. Sometimes she would fall asleep halfway through, her head resting against his arm, and he would sit there, holding her long after her breathing grew steady. But healing wasn't just about joy, it was about rebuilding trust. One evening after dinner, Emma looked up from her coloring book and asked quietly, Daddy, are you going to leave again, like before? Alexander froze. He put down his paperwork, walked around the table, and knelt beside her. I'll still work, he said honestly, but I'm not disappearing again. You are my priority now, always. Emma studied his face, searching, testing, hoping. When she finally nodded, a soft smile spread across her lips. Okay, she whispered, I believe you. And she did. By the end of the week, even the staff noticed the shift. The mansion wasn't silent anymore. It hummed with gentle conversations, soft music, Emma's laughter echoing down the hallways. The home that once held secrets now held something far more powerful: safety, love, and the first signs of true healing. As the days turned into weeks, Emma slowly began to rediscover pieces of herself she thought she had lost. Her laughter came more easily. Her steps grew lighter. The shadows that once lived behind her eyes began to fade, replaced by something new, something fragile but real: hope. Alexander noticed every small change. He noticed the way she hummed softly when she colored. He noticed how she no longer flinched when someone called her name. He noticed the way she reached for his hand without hesitation, trusting it would always be there. Still, he understood healing wasn't something that happened overnight. Pain didn't disappear just because danger was gone. So he made another decision, one that required courage, patience, and humility. He found a gentle child therapist, someone warm, someone soft-spoken, someone who could help Emma understand that what she endured wasn't her fault. Emma was nervous at first, gripping her father's sleeve as they entered the cozy office filled with stuffed animals and picture books. "Will you stay?" she whispered. "I'll be right outside," he promised. She nodded slowly, then walked in. The first session was short, just drawing, talking about feelings through colors. No pressure, no fear. When Emma came back out, she held up her paper proudly. It was a rainbow. Not perfect, not symmetrical, but full of life. "That's beautiful," Alexander said, genuinely moved. "It felt nice," she admitted softly. And that became part of their weekly routine. Therapy sessions, park visits, cooking messy dinners together, little steps forward, small but meaningful. One afternoon after a session, Emma and Alexander went to the lake behind their house. They sat on the wooden dock, feet dangling just above the water. The sun painted everything golden. "Daddy?" Emma asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Yes, sweetheart? Do you ever feel sad like me?" Alexander took a deep breath. "Yes, a lot actually, especially after your mom passed. I didn't know how to handle it, so I buried myself in work. I thought that was the best way to protect you." Emma looked up at him. "But you're here now." He smiled softly. "I'm here now." She slipped her hand into his. "We can be sad together and get better together." Something warm spread through his chest. Peace, relief, pride. He kissed the top of her head. "I'd like that very much." The wind rustled the trees. The lake shimmered. Emma leaned closer. And for the first time in a long time, both father and daughter felt steady. Because healing wasn't something they faced alone anymore. They were facing it side by side. Spring arrived quietly, brushing warm light across the Hale property. Flowers bloomed along the walkway, and the lake behind the house shimmered like a mirror. Life had settled into a calm rhythm, one that Emma had never known before, a rhythm where safety wasn't a fragile hope, but a daily reality. One Saturday morning, Emma woke up early, excitement bubbling in her chest. Today was special. Today wasn't about healing from the past. It wasn't about being afraid or careful. It was simply about celebrating how far they had come. She patted down the hallway in her socks, holding something behind her back. Alexander was in the kitchen pouring a cup of coffee. When he turned and saw her beaming up at him, he immediately smiled. "Well, someone's in a good mood," he teased gently. Emma took a deep breath, stepped closer, and held out a small box decorated with stickers. "I made something for you." Alexander set down his mug and knelt to her level. "For me? What's the occasion?" Her eyes sparkled. "Because you stayed. Because you heard me. Because you're my dad." Alexander swallowed the sudden lump in his throat and opened the box. Inside was a handmade bracelet. Bright blue beads, unevenly spaced, with a silver charm in the shape of a heart. "It's not perfect," Emma said shyly, "but I made it with my happy colors." He slipped it onto his wrist immediately. It's perfect. Absolutely perfect." Emma threw her arms around him in a hug that felt like sunlight. Later that day, they walked outside together. The air smelled of blooming jasmine. Birds hopped between branches. Emma ran ahead, spinning in circles, laughing without fear. Alexander watched her with quiet gratitude. She wasn't the same frightened girl who once whispered through tears. She was open again, light again. When she ran back to him, breathless, she looked up and said, "Do you think Mom can see us?" Alexander knelt, placing a hand over his heart. "I think she sees every step we take, and I think she's proud of you, so proud." Emma nodded thoughtfully, then slipped her small hand into his. "I think she's proud of you too." They walked toward the lake side by side, two hearts healing together, stronger than before. No secrets, no fear, just love, safety, and a future they were building hand in hand. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with soft gold. And in that warm glow, Alexander realized something simple, powerful, and true. His daughter wasn't just safe. She was finally free. And just like that, our story comes to an end. But you, yes, you, my wonderful friend watching until this very moment, you're still here. And if you're still here, it means something in this story touched your heart in a way only real life can. So let's take a breath together and look at what this journey really showed us. Emma's story reminds us that healing is possible when love finally has space to grow. It shows that silence can hide deep wounds, and sometimes the strongest thing we can do is speak up, or simply listen. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." The pain Emma endured became the very path that led her and her father to a deeper understanding and a stronger bond. Seneca once said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage," and that's true for every child, every parent, every soul trying to navigate loss, fear, or confusion. Healing isn't loud. It's not instant. It's gentle, like the first time someone finally tells you, "I'm here. I'm not leaving." If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply reminded you to cherish the people you love, please take a moment to like the video, share it so others can feel this warmth too, and subscribe so we can continue walking through stories that heal together. You matter. Your heart matters. And thank you, truly, for being here.